The screen lit up at 2:47 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I was sitting in my work truck outside a customer's house in Marietta, Georgia, eating a sandwich and scrolling through nothing in particular. My phone buzzed. FaceTime call incoming from Karen. I figured she was calling to ask me to pick up milk. Or maybe she found the water bill I left on the counter. I accepted it without thinking, the way you do with your wife of 14 years. She didn't say anything. The camera was pointing at the ceiling of our bedroom. I could hear music, something low, something I didn't recognize. And then I heard her laugh. Not a laugh I'd heard in a long time. Light. Loose. The kind of laugh you make when someone is making you feel good. I didn't say a word. I set the phone against the dashboard, face up, and I let it run. My sandwich was still in my hand. I don't think I took another bite. I just sat there in the Georgia heat with the AC running and watched the ceiling of my own bedroom for 11 minutes and 43 seconds while my wife of 14 years forgot that her phone had called me. I recorded every second of it on my dashcam's secondary screen recorder app. When she finally looked at the phone, when her face appeared, flushed and confused and then absolutely white, I was still sitting there. I said, "Hey, Karen." She hung up. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Dennis. I'm 47 years old. I'd been an HVAC technician for going on 22 years, started as an apprentice right out of high school, worked my way up, got my licenses, eventually started my own small operation. Dennis Howell Heating and Air. 2 vans, 3 guys including me, mostly residential work in the suburbs north of Atlanta. It's not glamorous work. You spend your days in crawl spaces and attics in Georgia summer heat. You come home dirty. You smell like metal and refrigerant. But it's honest work and it paid well enough. We had a 4-bedroom house in Ackworth, 2 cars, a boat we used maybe 4 times a year. Karen drove a 2021 Chevy Traverse. I had my work van and a personal F-150. Karen worked part-time as an office coordinator at a dental practice about 8 miles from the house. 3 days a week, Tuesday through Thursday. The other days she managed the house, picked up the kids, did the things that keep a family running. We had 2 kids, Tyler, who was 15 at the time, and Megan, who was 12. We were not a perfect couple. I want to be straight about that. We'd had our rough patches. The years when money was tight. The year my mother got sick and I was distracted and checked out. A stretch about 4 years back where we went to 3 sessions of couples counseling and then just quietly stopped going without really fixing anything. But we weren't fighting. We weren't miserable. We were doing what a lot of couples do after 14 years, coasting. Running the machine. Getting the kids to school, paying the mortgage, watching TV on the couch on Friday nights. I was not looking for problems. The first sign, and I mean the first thing that actually lodged somewhere in the back of my mind and stayed there, was a smell. Not perfume. Not cologne, exactly. More like a deodorant or a body wash. Something clean and specific that I didn't use. I noticed it on a pillowcase one morning back in early April, about 3 months before the FaceTime call. I registered it, felt a small cold thing move through me, and then I told myself she'd probably been at the gym and laid down before showering. I told myself that for 3 months. The smell was the first thing. The phone was the second. Karen had always been the kind of person who left her phone on the kitchen counter. Charging, face up, no big deal. We weren't the type of couple who went through each other's phones, not because we had some formal agreement about it, just because there was never a reason. After the smell on the pillow, I started noticing the phone was always face down. Always on silent. Always with her when she moved from room to room. I told myself people get more private about their phones. It's just a thing that happens. Then there was the gym. Karen had always gone to Planet Fitness on Monday and Wednesday mornings. That was the routine for years. Around May she started going on Saturdays too. And the Saturday sessions started running long, 2 hours, sometimes 2.5. She'd come home with wet hair and that same clean soap smell, and I'd be standing in the kitchen making lunch for the kids, and I'd notice and I'd feel that cold thing again, and I'd say nothing. I told myself she was getting serious about fitness. Good for her. The third thing was harder to explain away. In June, I came home early from a job that got cancelled. Customer had a family emergency, called us off at noon. I pulled into the driveway at 12:40 on a Tuesday. Karen's Traverse was there. She wasn't supposed to be home, it was a work day. I walked in the side door and called her name. She came out of the bedroom fast, a little breathless, said she'd come home for lunch and fell asleep. She seemed fine. Normal. Made a joke about getting old. But the bedroom smelled like that soap again. And there was a coffee mug on the nightstand with lipstick on it that wasn't Karen's shade. I stood in that bedroom for about 30 seconds after she went back to the kitchen. I looked at that mug. I looked at the slightly rumpled side of the bed that I don't sleep on. And something in me just settled. Like a gear clicking into place. Not rage. Not panic. Just a cold, quiet certainty that I needed to stop guessing and start knowing. I drove to Best Buy that same afternoon. I bought a Blink indoor camera, small, wireless, runs on batteries, connects to your phone. I also bought a second one just in case. I paid cash. I came home, waited until Karen took the kids to her sister's for dinner, and I spent 40 minutes figuring out the best placement. The master bedroom was too obvious she'd find it. But the hallway outside the bedroom had a built-in bookshelf with framed photos and decorative stuff. I put the first camera behind a ceramic owl that had been sitting on that shelf for 6 years. Angle was perfect, it caught the full bedroom doorway and about half the living room. I set up the second one in the garage, pointed at the driveway. Both cameras fed to an app on my phone. Motion activated. I got alerts every time something moved. I didn't say a word to anyone. 3 days later, the alerts started telling me a story. The garage camera caught it first. Thursday, June 19, 11:14 a.m. Karen's Traverse pulls out. Standard stuff, she's heading to work. But at 12:52 p.m., a silver Honda Accord pulls into my driveway. Parks where I usually park. A man gets out. White guy, maybe early 40s, medium build, dark hair. He's carrying nothing. He walks to the front door like he's been there before. Like he knows the house. He goes inside. I'm sitting in a customer's attic in Kennesaw when my phone buzzes with the alert. I look at the garage camera footage on the app. I watch this man walk into my house. I'm holding a refrigerant gauge in one hand and my phone in the other, and I am completely still for about 15 seconds. I don't go home. I wait. The hallway camera picks him up inside. I can see him moving through the frame toward the bedroom. 12:54 p.m. At 2:38 p.m., the hallway camera shows him leaving the bedroom. He goes back through the frame toward the front door. The garage camera catches him getting in the Accord and backing out at 2:41 p.m. He was in my house for 1 hour and 47 minutes. I screenshot everything. I saved every clip to my Google Drive the moment it processed. I also had the ThinkWare dash cam in my work van set to autosave to SD card. I'd already started running a screen recorder on my personal phone whenever I thought something might happen, but I hadn't needed it yet. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched it happen 4 more times. Always on days Karen was supposedly at work. Always between noon and 3. Always the same silver Accord. On July 2nd, I got a partial plate from the garage camera, good enough. I didn't go to the police with it. Not yet. I called a buddy of mine who does repo work. Guy named Marcus. I told him I needed a full plate run on a partial. He didn't ask why. He called me back in 2 hours. The Accord was registered to a man named Scott Bellamy. Age 43. Address in Smyrna, Georgia. I Googled him that night after the kids were in bed and Karen was watching something in the living room 12 feet away from me. Scott Bellamy was a personal trainer. He had an Instagram. Lots of gym photos. Lots of client testimonials. Karen had joined a new gym in May. There it was. I sat with all of it for 2 weeks. I didn't confront Karen. I didn't change my behavior. I came home, had dinner, helped Tyler with his summer reading, watched TV. I was running a play and I needed all the pieces before I moved. I started keeping a written log. Dates, times, duration, camera clips. I transferred everything to an encrypted folder. I was building something I could take into a courtroom if I needed to. And then, on July 16th, Karen's phone called mine by accident. 2:47 p.m. I'm in the truck. I accept the call. And I am staring at the ceiling of my own bedroom. For the first 3 seconds I almost say something. Almost. But something stops me, the same cold gear click feeling I'd had since June. I set the phone on the dash, face up, propped against the windshield so the front camera of my phone could see the screen. I opened my dashcam app with my other hand and hit the screen record function. The one Marcus had told me about months ago when we were talking about documentation for his repo work. Recording started at 2:47 and 22 seconds p.m. The audio was clear. The bedroom acoustics are good, hardwood floors, not much soft furniture to absorb sound. I could hear Karen's voice. I could hear a man's voice. I could hear exactly what was happening. I sat in that truck in the Georgia heat and I did not move. My hands were in my lap. My sandwich was on the passenger seat. I breathed through my nose. At 2:51 Karen moved and the phone shifted. For about 40 seconds the camera was pointing more toward the window and I could see the curtains I'd hung 3 years ago when we redid the room. Then it shifted back. At 2:58 there was some conversation. I heard Scott's voice clearly. That was the first time I had a voice to go with the face from the cameras. Deep voice. Relaxed. He said something about dinner. Karen laughed. At 3:01 the phone got moved again. And then I heard Karen say, very clearly, close to the phone, "Oh my God." Then her face filled the screen. Flushed. Hair not right. Looking at the phone like it just became a weapon. She saw me. I was still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a face. I just looked at her through the screen and I said, "Hey, Karen." Her face did something I don't have words for. Every single thing she'd been doing for the past 4 months moved across her expression in about 2 seconds. She hung up. I sat in the truck for another 4 minutes. Then I saved the recording 11 minutes, 43 seconds, directly to Google Drive and texted myself the link. Then I called Marcus and told him I was going to need the name of a good divorce attorney. Then I drove to my next job. Because I had a customer waiting and I am not the kind of man who lets things fall apart at work. That evening I came home like it was a normal day. Karen was pale. She tried twice to start a conversation and I answered normally and briefly and did not give her any room to have the talk she wanted to have. I needed one more day. The next morning, after Karen left for work and the kids were at summer camp, I called a family law attorney named Patricia Haskins in Marietta. Her firm had good reviews and one of my customers had used her in a divorce the year before. I had a phone consultation at 10 a.m. I told Patricia I had camera footage, a screen recording of a FaceTime call, a GPS log from Karen's car. Yes, I had put a Brickhouse GPS tracker on the Traverse the week before, just as a backup, and a 2-week written log with timestamps. I told her I had a name, a face, and a vehicle registration. Patricia was quiet for a moment and then said, "Mr. Howell, you've done most of my job for me." We met in person 2 days later. I brought a flash drive with everything on it. Here's where it gets complicated in a way I wasn't expecting. Patricia's paralegal did a standard background pull on Scott Bellamy as part of the case prep. Routine stuff: assets, prior marriages, any relevant legal history. What came back was not routine. Scott Bellamy had a prior arrest in 2019 in Cobb County. Theft by deception. The case had been pleaded down and he'd done probation, no prison time. But the details of the original charge were specific. He had been in a relationship with a woman, gained access to her financial accounts, and transferred approximately $31,000 before she caught on. Patricia called me with this information on a Thursday afternoon. I was in a customer's crawl space. I climbed out and sat on the back bumper of my van and just listened. I went home that night and pulled our joint financial accounts. Everything looked normal on the surface. But Karen had a personal checking account. She'd always had it, we both did, nothing unusual about that, and I had never had reason to look at it. I didn't have access to it. But I knew where Karen kept her password notebook. Old school actual paper, in a shoebox in the closet. She'd had it for years. I found the account login. I'm not proud of what I did next, and I want to be clear that Patricia told me later it was not admissible. But I needed to know. Karen's personal account had $4,200 in it. That was normal. She kept a couple thousand in there for personal spending. What was not normal was the transaction history. Over the previous 6 months, $1,800 had gone out in Zelle transfers. Small amounts, $200 here, $300 there. All to the same recipient. S. Bellamy. She had been sending him money. I sat on the bedroom floor with her password notebook in my hands, and I thought about Scott Bellamy's 2019 fraud conviction, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not rage. Something colder than rage. I was not just the husband of a cheating wife. I was potentially a fraud victim's adjacent party in whatever Scott Bellamy was running. I called Patricia the next morning and told her what I'd found. She told me to let her handle the next steps. She had a contact at the Cobb County DA's office and she wanted to make a call before we proceeded with anything else. 3 weeks later, 2 detectives from the Cobb County Financial Crimes Unit knocked on Scott Bellamy's door in Smyrna. I told Karen I wanted a divorce on a Sunday morning in August. The kids were at my sister-in-law's. I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and I said, "I know everything, Karen. I have documentation of all of it. I'm filing Monday morning." She cried. She tried to explain. She said it had meant nothing, that it was a mistake, that she didn't know about his past. She said she loved me. I listened to all of it. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. When she was done, I said, "I believe that you mean that right now. But it doesn't change what happened and it doesn't change what I'm doing." She moved into her sister's house 3 days later. Tyler and Megan stayed with me. They were in their school district. I was the stable parent with the stable income and the house. Karen and I agreed to a temporary custody arrangement while the divorce processed, kids with me during the school week, with Karen on weekends. It was hard on the kids. I'm not going to dress that up. Tyler was angry at everyone for about 2 months. Megan cried every night for the first week. I sat on the edge of her bed and I told her that none of this was her fault and that both her parents loved her and that things were going to be okay. I said it enough times that I started to believe it. Karen lost her job at the dental practice in September. The office manager, a woman who went to church with my sister, heard through the community what had happened, and apparently Karen's performance had been slipping for months. They let her go quietly. Her social circle contracted fast. We'd had a group of couple friends, neighbors, people from the kids' school. When the story got out, as stories do in suburban Atlanta, most of those couples sided with me or went neutral. A few of Karen's closer girlfriends stuck by her. But the dinner parties stopped. The neighborhood group chat went quiet for her. And then there was Scott. The Cobb County investigation into Scott Bellamy expanded when the detectives found 2 other women who'd had similar experiences, relationships, financial transfers, the same pattern as the 2019 case. Karen was identified as a potential victim in that investigation, though the amounts were small compared to the others. She cooperated with detectives in exchange for not being charged as a knowing participant, which Patricia believed she wasn't anyway. Scott Bellamy was arrested in October. Charged with 3 counts of theft by deception. His Instagram page went dark. Karen had given a man $1,800 of what was ultimately my household income and helped him cheat on whatever other women he was running the same play on. She was not a criminal. But she was not a victim either, not in any way I could feel sympathy for. That was her to sort out. Not my problem anymore. The divorce was finalized on February 14th, Valentine's Day, which I did not plan and found grimly funny. Patricia was good. Because I had documented everything and filed first, and because Georgia is an equitable distribution state and I was the primary income earner with established documentation of marital misconduct, the settlement landed well in my direction. I kept the house. I kept the boat. I got primary physical custody of both kids with Karen having standard visitation. She got her car and her personal accounts and a small amount of transitional support for 6 months, which Patricia had fought down from what Karen's attorney initially wanted. I was not happy about the divorce. I want to be clear about that. I did not celebrate. I don't take pleasure in watching a family come apart. But I was done carrying something that had been broken for a long time without me knowing just how broken it was. By March, I had refinanced the house in my name alone. Tyler had started talking to me again, real conversations, not just grunts at the dinner table. Megan had joined a soccer league and I was driving her to practice on Tuesday evenings, which had become the best part of my week. I also took on a new hire, a young kid named Darius, just got his HVAC certification, reminds me of myself at that age. Giving him the same start someone gave me. Some evenings I sit on the back deck with a beer and I think about that Wednesday afternoon in July. Sitting in my work truck outside a stranger's house, a half-eaten sandwich in my hand, watching my marriage end on a 3-inch screen. 11 minutes and 43 seconds. People ask me, not many people, I don't tell this story widely, people ask me if I'm angry. And I tell them honestly, not really. Not anymore. I had the right information. I made the right moves. I didn't blow up in a parking lot, didn't say things in front of my kids, didn't do anything I'd need to undo later. I built a case the way I approach any job, methodically, with the right tools, one step at a time. That's who I am. The FaceTime call was an accident. But everything that came after it wasn't.